Okay, now we're live. I think I'm gonna double check on my phone. Yes, we are. Yay! Okay. Thank you so much for being here today, Tiffany. Um, I am Gabrielle. For everybody watching, if you've never met me or seen me before, I am the admin of this Facebook group, and I'm really excited. I know to talk about something that's not exciting, but something we're both passionate about, and that is audits. So if you are watching live, you can drop any comments or questions or whatever below. I'll be checking them on my phone. If you're watching the replay and you have questions, put hashtag replay and we will come back and answer them. But I would love, Tiffany, if you would start and just tell people who you are and what you do now and what you used to do.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I love having combos with you. Like we may be the only two people who ever come on live to this and find this fun, but
I
I
know.
love talking to
That's
you about it.
okay. It's fine.
So I'm Tiffany Tait-Moss. I am an LCSW, so I am a therapist by trade, but I've been a healthcare executive for many, many years. I currently work as the Chief Strategy Officer for Mindfully Behavioral Health, which is a national outpatient behavioral health services company, and we operate in about 5 states. Um, Past history prior to Mindfully has really focused on de novos of all levels of care. And so the building and development of mental health and behavioral health treatment centers nationally. And so it's been a beautiful kind of complete circle coming into Mindfully Behavioral Health with the outpatient world and how that sort of all fits together in our level of care puzzle, right?
Yes. Which is amazing. And I feel like you have done so much in your career, and I appreciate you coming and sharing with people. And I think, I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I'm like, where should we start? I think maybe can you give us, like, thinking about audits, and most people in this group are in private practice and in outpatient. We have some larger operations, like I know there's a couple IOPs in here, but generally, somebody's going to get audited. What do you think they should know? What are some red flags to auditors? Like, what can you tell us? Give us like the inside dirt.
So many years ago, just the past history, I've been working sort of on audits and higher level insurance payer audits called SIUs or special investigative unit audits. And so I'll kind of focus a little bit on that because I want to kind of destigmatize the word and make us less fearful of therapists as we hear about audits, and they're going to become more frequent, right, in this season. But in general, I think that this is something, like I said, coming into Mindfully with outpatient care, this wasn't necessarily something that highly impacted outpatient care historically. The focus of significant payer audits and medical record audits was focused on higher levels of care, the hospitals, ones with higher utilization and cost. And we've seen a bit of a shift as they've begun to sort of right size those level of cares, and that there's been a larger buy-in to outpatient services countrywide since the pandemic, a larger focus on that. So that's what we'll talk about, right? Just specific to like private practices, outpatient care. What should I know about audits? And the first thing is that it'll happen 1000%. There's no way to avoid, there are ways to avoid it and to minimize it and to limit it. But in and of itself, you absolutely will go through a payer audit at some point. It is part of the practice of ensuring that we are good stewards of the services that we say that we are providing and that we are within the contractual limitations of what payers have promised to reimburse us for. And it's in our own protection. These work in our benefit if we have value-based contracts, if we're looking for outcomes and better payer relationships. And so I want to sort of take us away from this fearful side of an audit, because if we do these well, these become our own forms of advocacy for our own services, for our own businesses. And so are audits particularly scary? Yes, if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so, one area, Gabrielle and I are on the other side of, right, with public healthcare versus like commercial healthcare. I focus a lot more primarily on commercial healthcare.
Mhm.
Difference with that being is every single payer will have a different set of rules.
Yeah.
So if you are in network with Cigna and with Humana, but then next door your friend is in network with Anthem, you need to consider specific payer rules and guidelines for the billable code for your program, right? So if you're a network, there's a very specific set of standards and guidelines that'll tell you exactly how you need to document, within what time frame you need to document every single whether it's an assessment, whether it's it needs to be co-signed because of dependent licensure. So there are very prescriptive rules for the services we provide, but that's a good thing. It's in black and white out there somewhere, right? And so if I know the rules to the game, I can absolutely show up in that. And our ability to show up in that is our ability to advocate for our clients to have continued care without disruption.
That was so beautifully said. I was like, yes, Tiffany, yes. And I also train and talk about this in the exact same way that you do. So I just love that it's like empowerment. Like it is scary, but you don't need to be afraid. Everything you need to know is out there. You're gonna get audited. It's fine. It happens. It's gonna keep happening.
And a lot of one of the, depending on what your goals are in private practice, some people would like to say, I'd love to scale and I'd like to see my practice grow larger. Even if I don't want a super large practice, I have a certain size in mind. And it's important to note, depending on who your payer is and how much you are billing that payer within any calendar year or any policy year, the quicker you sort of get to these limits, that you will trigger an audit. Again, not a bad thing. We should be absolutely prepared that if we're billing a payer, that chart should be prepared to go in that same day. And
Exactly.
if we believe in that and we walk in that and we document to that, and that just kind of comes the cloth of our practices, this doesn't take a lot of oversight. Once they ask for medical record and you're able to just simply send that medical record and it's in line with everything, I think this is more about preparing. And so I think that's some major challenges that I tend to see practices with. How do I even build the system for this? And how do I hold other practitioners in my practice accountable to this?
Yeah. Do you have anything that you can suggest or speak to on that part of it?
I think you have to determine what sort of practice you have. Within mindfully behavioral health, I would see this. We have a very large number of 1099 contractors that work within us, as well as there is a portion of W-2 as well. I think it depends. Am I in my own private practice? And what does that look like for me in terms of liability and how many people are working under me? Am I working independently within someone else's private practice? So I think one of the first things to determine is what's my level of liability
Mm-hmm.
within this system. And I mean that to say it's our license. It's always our liability. It is always our name, our ethics, our license on the line with everything we sign and every intervention we do. And we should take that with the utmost responsibility. But in a shared system where there's W-2s and so forth, you may have legal representatives or compliance officers that can assist you with these things and that can help you to set up those guardrails. And so I would say if you have that opportunity and you're not sort of standalone, lean into that. Lean
Mm-hmm.
into asking if there isn't one, can you please ensure that we're setting up a payer audit system so that we're just getting this done on the front end so this is not a problem. As a
Mm-hmm.
clinical director, one of the biggest challenges, or a clinical supervisor, is when you get a chart audit from 2 years ago and I need to go track down that therapist to go figure out what happened here. Is the client, what was the client's prognosis? And you could avoid that, right? So I think preparing, leaning into the systems you have, and if you don't, hiring a consultant to literally get you where you have to go and just set up the system one time for maintenance. But it can't be ignored. The audit will come. There's nothing to worry about if you're prepared for it.
Exactly. If you're ready, then you just send everything off and you'll
That's
be
it.
fine. And you probably will never hear from them until the next time.
They'll be back, right? But as long as you keep them happy, then we're all right until the next time.
Do you think there are any like particular red flags that can set off an audit? Like obviously besides, the limits of maybe if you see somebody like twice a week, but do you think there's any particular codes that set things off, like using interactive complexity or things
Absolutely.
like that? Mhm.
So when you see these interactive complexities, if I'm billing for longer sessions because there was a higher complexity range, or I'm billing for something that diagnostically may be different, I'm using an innovative service that may have certain diagnostic criteria. Somebody might be doing ketamine, somebody might be doing TMS, depending on what services they're offering in conjunction with. Um, all of those things are outliers, right? And so that tends to take a secondary look. And that's a very easy secondary look. Your first step is never an SIU audit. Your first step is always going to be a medical record request.
Hmm.
And so this is going to be by documented as well. Did I clinically justify? Was it as evidenced by, right? All of the sort of basic 101s of clinical documentation. And did I clinically justify my service for whatever that billable code was? If it was supposed to be 54 minutes, right? Like 50 to 54 minutes, was it? And so ensuring that I'm checking those boxes, you may never have to get to an SIU. Or rather prolonged. You could put that off for a very long time if you're passing these medical record audits. If
Hmm.
there are challenges at that early stage, that's when we see this progress into an audit and into an SIU.
Hmm. And you brought up something that I wanted to ask you about also, and that is medical necessity, because that is always the $1 million question that I see from everybody is, and I talk about this a lot too. And by the way, if you're watching, my note template has check boxes for medical necessity as well, but it is more than checking a box. So can you speak to that a little bit, Tiffany, about what folks should think about or document to when we're thinking about medical necessity? Because I find that there's a lot of conversation about this. Therapists are really worried about it, and it's not like we're doctors, right? And we can say, like, oh, your wrist is clearly broken because the bone is this way. And so we need an x-ray that makes it medically necessary for therapy. And we're dealing with people and emotions and thoughts and behaviors. Like it's a little bit different, right? So can you speak to that a little bit?
So it is a little bit different, but for the sake of managed care in this country, they don't necessarily see it as so, right? And so for us, what's very abstract, right, is very black and white
Hmm.
in the insurance world. And so medical necessity can even in its highest form, right, is what is the clinical justification? What is this person's diagnosis, and why do they need this treatment that you're recommending for that diagnosis? And that could be an intervention, like evidence-based intervention. It could be level of care that I need to prove the medical necessity that this person needs a detox level of care versus being in outpatient services. So there's many levels to what this could look like. Your challenge is, who am I billing?
Yeah.
Because medical necessity is going to look different for CMS than it is for Humana, than it is for for Aetna. And it will also look different if I'm billing on the mental health side or if I'm billing on the addiction side, right? And so they also tend to have per policy or per payer what their medical necessity criteria is. So I
Mhm.
would literally say Google it, right? So if I know Cigna's my highest bulk of my claims per month, I'd probably start there
Yeah.
and say, what is the medical necessity criteria for Cigna for an intensive outpatient, if that's a service that I was providing or wanted to start? And what would I need to say in a prior authorization or in utilization reviews and in clinical documentation to justify this level of care?
Hmm.
Excuse me. And so they may say, this is an addiction-based client. I'm using ASAM as your guideline. And
Hmm.
so every time you're documenting to medical necessity for that particular client and their diagnosis, you're literally going to look at ASAM and write that in, right? Like, where does this fall within that criteria? And again, a lot of the different payers use different ones depending on what you're working with. But I would absolutely start there and start with what your biggest bulk of claims are per month. And that's the first kind of big chew I would take.
I think that's really good advice. Thank you. I see people are watching live. So if you have questions, now is your chance because this is a great opportunity. I think the other thing I wanted to ask you was about values-based care and if you can speak to that a little bit.
So I will absolutely tell you that I am not the expert in value-based care, but I can absolutely share what I know about it. And some of the history we've seen, because this has been probably aging myself at this point, right? I've been doing this way too long at this point, but it's been a huge shift in what value-based care looked like from the time of ACA and Obamacare and our shift in how we did payer relations at that point until now. And so I think it's really starting to pick up steam. And there's a lot of softwares and supports that could help us to kind of get that right now.
Yes, and that is hugely important too, because I think that's the other thing that comes up is like, how do I know? How do I track this? What am I supposed to do? And there are tools out there that can do that for you, especially in this day and age. Like we have lots and lots of supports and automations and tech that can
Yes.
make our lives a lot easier.
Please lean into them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, hugely important. What else did I miss, or do you think that you would want to share for folks just in general about audits or documentation or even systems? Any other little nuggets?
Let's see. Let's harp into value-based care while we're here for just a moment, because I do get that question a lot. And people are like, well, how do I get a value-based contract and how do I get more money per claim? I think the natural assumption is if I get a value-based contract, I'm doing great work. So they're going to give me extra money for great work. And my challenge would be back a lot. How do we prove the great work we're doing, right? Like when we're in school, they teach us if we didn't document it, didn't happen. With
Mhm.
value-based care, if there's not an outcome, it didn't happen. And
Mhm.
the ability to collect that data, track that data, support clients over an extended period of time and looking at their outcomes in that way is going to be essential for value-based care. Your challenge, on the other hand, is there's no standard rule.
Yeah.
This is not like a DSM that says like this is the criteria and this is what matches. This is about one-off payer relations for the most part. Some payers have an idea of what this looks like. There are some payers, particularly with Medicaid carve-outs, that often like to focus on our marginalized groups. If you're able to touch this marginalized group within a certain amount of time and provide X amount of services within a certain amount of time, those are some out-of-the-box value-based contracts that you may be able to see. But a lot of times this is one-off with the payer, and determining what outcomes you can provide that are interesting to them, right? To be able to negotiate what that should look like.
Mhm.
Most of the time, you're not coming to the table with that conversation until you have something to provide. And so I think that's the most important thing to call out. What are you tracking? What are you doing well? What can you say? And proof in the pudding that we're doing this, sort of open up those conversations.
Mhm.
And most often, this is not about any upfront adjustment to contract, but rather opening the conversation for what could be on the back end after auditing, which is often quarterly, semi-yearly, things like that, to determine are you in line with those outcomes.
That was super helpful information and answer. That was a great little nugget. Thank you.
Problem.
So, would your recommendation be that people should start tracking these things now from the beginning just to have that data?
I think you have to determine as a private practice, what is your goal? If
Mhm.
you are billing insurance and you're working within a managed care system versus private pay, which there's a lot more flexibility, right, in that world, if you're not taking insurances. But if you're in this insurance world, you really have to focus on, am I diagnosing appropriately, assessing appropriately? Do I have the internal systems for long-term care? This often means making sure I have automated systems to do consistent follow-up care or targeted case managers to kind of keep on top of that tracking.
Mhm.
And if you do, you absolutely want to consider this model. This will be the model of the future. Insurance is not keen on paying us for services that they don't know it's working. Like you said with medical, right? Like I broke my arm. I can see if the arm healed in a fracture. They
Mhm.
don't know that, right? A PHQ-9 is a fracture for, is an X-ray for us, right? And so, and even that, I don't want to downplay our assessments at all, but they're looking for so much more than the assessments. Now, what did that assessment mean? What did you do with that outcome? What did it look like in the change of their lifestyle
Mhm.
once this improved? And so this is getting deeper by the year. And so if you're not in the realm of setting up at minimum for value-based care, I think this would be a challenge as we see shifts in insurance reimbursements over the next few years.
Do you think there's going to be any other trends or shifts that people should start planning for or be aware of in the future as well, besides that one, which is huge and changes the way a lot of people work?
So I think both. I think that the two things we talked about would be the two primary things I would tell people to not be afraid of, simply prepare for, right? Because if you're preparing for one, you're preparing for the other. And so there's a win in value-based care for the clients that we serve, knowing that we can give them better outcomes. We're not just trusting our faith in ourselves, but we're seeing the proof in the pudding. That's
Yeah.
huge advocacy, but also for ourselves, right? Like to be a therapist and to be able to hold that space. It's often hard when not recognizing what that means. When you're dealing with a client so deeply, we don't always see the same progress, right? Or the same areas that we're missing. When we can see that in a statistic and we can work within that to adjust our care, it gives us a superpower. So I think we really need to embrace this idea of value-based care on so many levels.
Mhm.
Opposite end is we have got to wake up and be ready for audits this year. And so across the board by nature, audits are coming, but as we've seen outpatients swell in terms of therapists pouring into this space, private equity pouring into this space, the restructuring of hospital organizations into the outpatient space, we are going to absolutely see the same thing that happened in the higher levels of care come to the outpatient levels of care, but without the systems that we had for wraparound care in the higher levels of care. And so there has to be more preparation work. And we can't be surprised, right? Like there is a huge push in this country at this moment to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. And wherever you stand on those issues are moot, right? Like fraud, waste, and abuse is a challenge for us all because if there is an assumption that there's waste and abuse, there is the limitation of not being able to justify my reimbursement and payment, right? I'm able to justify why our clinicians need to be paid, why our contract should be renegotiated well, if I'm able to prove to you that we've done everything within the parameters. And so in managed care, there's difficulty, right, in having your own voice and having your own ability to negotiate and have leverage.
Mhm.
Our SIUs and our value-based contracts are our leverage, and that's our way to advocate for ourselves, our clinicians, and our clients.
Mhm. Yes, I just am like, keep talking. I want to listen.
I'm not sure there's anything else. Everybody else has to be bored with this topic. I know it's like the worst topic for
I
everybody else,
know.
right?
I mean, I know it's boring because we know this, but it is so important and it is part of our work. So I really appreciate you coming and being so transparent and sharing everything that you've shared because,
Absolutely. Anytime. It's
yeah.
so lovely always talking to you.
Thank you. Well, I don't see any questions right now, but I see some people watching. So here's your chance. Or come back later, put hashtag replay so I get notified. You can also follow Tiffany on LinkedIn and connect with her there or through Mindfully. Is that okay too?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Anything else that you would want to add? And I'll make sure that I put your LinkedIn below if people want to connect with you. But if there's anything else important or ways that people can connect with you, let us know.
Nothing else important that comes to mind, but I'm always open to more combos, right? And I'm happy to connect in LinkedIn. And or if you have questions about the services we provide at Mindfully and sort of how that fits into the outpatient space, please check us out on mindfully.com.
Perfect. I'm going to put the links for everything below. Again, if you have questions, put them here. We will come back and answer them. And thank you again, Tiffany, for spending time with me today.
Anytime.
Okay, bye.